It's Australia in 1982. A news report from the 8th of October in 1982 read jobless figures have broken the 500,000 mark for the first time since the Great Depression of the 1930s. The national unemployment rate is now at 7.4%. 500,000 people out of work in 1982. In 1982, the Northern Land Council approved a mine. Cameron, tell us a bit about it.
So basically there was this massive uranium source in the Northern Territory that the Pan-Continental Mining Company wanted to strip resources from. So in 1982 the mining of the area was given the go-ahead by the traditional Aboriginal owners and the Northern Territory Lands Council.
So it must have been really controversial.
Yeah, for
Aboriginal
a lot of years.
land, they wanted the uranium and it looked like it was going to make a lot of money.
Yep. And before then
This is Jabiluka, by the way. Quite a big story, an ongoing story with a lot of repercussions.
Yeah. Before then, it had been largely unaffected by Australian development. And then it's amazing because it had over 207,400 tonnes of uranium, and they believed that they could produce 3,000 tonnes a year, and that was a number that would grow.
Wow, 3,000 tonnes of uranium a year. 3,000 tonnes a year, which apparently equates to around $13 million per annum. Now, it was 1980 when Azaria Chamberlain went missing, but it was 1982, 2 years after Azaria went missing, that the Chamberlains were actually found guilty. Justice James Moorhead sentenced Miss Chamberlain to life imprisonment with hard labour after the jury took just 6 hours to arrive at their verdict. Mrs. Chamberlain's husband Michael was found guilty of being an accessory after the fact and will be sentenced on Monday. Justice Muirhead called the trial the most sensational in this country's history and complimented the jury on its work in contributing to making the Chamberlain prosecution a good and lawful trial. Its members were excused by Justice Muirhead from jury service for 10 years. One juror showed the strain when she held her head in her hands and wept during the last season. After the verdict, Mrs. Chamberlain, 34 years old at that time, was taken away to Berrimah Jail on the outskirts of Darwin, where she was expected to serve her sentence of life in prison. And as we know, the Chamberlain saga didn't end there. Life in prison, and Michael was not quite sentenced at that stage. It came quite a lot later, actually, where she was actually released, and then a lot later after that where she was actually pardoned. But all of that happened in 1982. In 1982, the National Gallery of Australia was officially opened, Francis.
Yes, by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II on 12th of October, after a planning, design and construction period of 14 years.
Sorry to interrupt, but it just sounds like the Queen couldn't stay away from us in the late 70s, early 80s. It's like she was here a lot. I suppose it feels that way because she's a bit elderly now. She doesn't come as often, but she used to come to Australia
quite often. Australia was one of her, I think, favourite places.
I think so.
She used to cut the ribbon a lot, make things.
Yeah. And drew big crowds as well, I have to say.
Yes. It was originally meant to have been completed and opened by 1976, but due to diminished funding and the priority of the High Court being constructed instead, the construction was temporarily halted in 1975.
Temporarily halted, and 8 years later.
Yes, it finally got opened.
Wow.
It also won the Royal Australian Institute of Architects Canberra Medallion for the design that year.
But I wonder if it's still known as, because it won an award for its architecture, right? I wonder if it's still known as one of Canberra's most wonderful buildings.
I honestly don't know, but I think the same people who created that also created the High Court.
And that's in Canberra as well?
Yes.
High Court?
And they actually did a competition for the National Gallery for the design. I think 12 architecture teams all went head-to-head to see who could come up with the best design, and that's who won.
Wow. Also in 1982, on the 17th of August, in fact, the Omega Navigation Station became operational in Victoria, leaving behind the dispute between the federal and state governments about the construction. The station features a 427-metre high telecommunications tower, the tallest structure in Australia at the time, and provides a global 24-hour navigation system with links to other stations in Norway, Liberia, Hawaii, Argentina, and Japan.
Wait, can I just say, so it said the tallest building in Australia at the time?
Yes.
Wait,
Yet
so that
last
means it
time, when we did our
surpassed-
last podcast in 1981,
Yeah,
you talked about
Centrepoint Tower. So does that
Sydney
mean that-
Tower.
Yeah, Sydney Tower. So that
Let's
means
not raise that old chestnut again.
telecommunications tower surpassed the Centrepoint Tower.
Well, certainly here it says it was 427 metres high. Now, Centrepoint Tower, I'm pretty sure, is 308 metres.
Yeah,
so this
something like
eclipses that. And it certainly says here the tallest structure in Australia.
Yeah, well, technically, that it says that it's the biggest building in Australia at the time. So, do you think it still is? Is it still there, operational?
I don't know. I'd like to know if the Omega navigation station still exists. Well, I'm sure it still exists, but if it's still doing what they originally said.
Yeah.
In 1982, the Australian Women's Weekly went monthly and caused no end of confusion for the rest of time. With people going, what? The Australian Women's Weekly comes out monthly? But yes, that was the year 1982 when that started to happen. On a legal note, the Freedom of Information Act was introduced. A news report on December 1 said the new Federal Freedom of Information Act passed by the Fraser government seems to raise more questions than it answers. It clearly gives citizens access to personal information held on government files and the right to correct inaccuracies.
Oh, wow.
But exemption clauses are so broad they may restrict access in the most controversial instances. It still exists, I can tell you that. The Freedom of Information Act I use quite often in my field of work, so it still exists today.
So you can see the information as long as we think that that's okay, and
Yeah.
we want you to see it.
And the odd spot of 1982, West Australian police are on the lookout for a kidnap victim, Mr. Ray Manico's 3-bedroom timber house. Mr. Manico of Wanora in Perth went on a holiday and returned to find his house had completely vanished. That happened in 1982. And that, my friends, is 1982. I'll even do the sound effect here. Beep, 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 beep. Breaking news. We've just discovered, Francis,
that the Omega Tower was destroyed.
the
It was
Omega Tower was
decommissioned
destroyed.
in 2008,
Mm-hmm.
and then, well, this article's from 2015. It said over time from explosions and etc. it just collapsed.
Explosions.
It was brought crashing to Earth. The Department of Defense decided to demolish the tower after a young base jumper plunged to his death. So because some idiot tried to jump off it, they decided to destroy it.
It just sounds like it was a problem from the start, trying to be Australia's tallest building
Yeah,
out there.
exactly.
And that was 1982.